Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. I'm your host. And today our guest is Shelby Knudsen from Fernie. Shelby, it's great to have you as a guest on Talking Kootenay Books.
Thank you so much, Keith.
This is a little bit of a return visit for you. It goes back a few years now when you introduced your first book, and that was Mountain Girl. You were writing under a different name, Shelby Kane at that point in time.
Yes.
So just tell me about the new book.
Okay. Well, the new book's called One Night Only, and the idea came sort of just around COVID, and I'm a musician as well as a writer, and I was thinking about writing something that was a little closer to what I know, and I had an itch to write another novel, and I had been playing a lot of music at the time, and I just thought I really wanted to capture, if I could, what it felt like to be on the stage and sort of the relationship that happens between the musician and the audience. That was sort of my first intention when I wanted to write the book, and then from there, the story grew into what it is now.
Okay, good. You know, they say you should write things that you know about.
Yes.
and I know that you are a musician, and you perform and part of a band and so forth. So it all sort of dovetails together. How much does that experience influence what you write about?
So much. Yes, so much. And I actually, when I wrote Mountain Girl, it's very much based in this area and in this topography, and I took a lot of what I knew. And then I actually had a second novel that I took on a very different journey. It hasn't been published yet, but after that experience, I really felt that it was important to come back to what I know. And being on the stage, I've been in a band called Wild Honey, and we've been a band for about 11 years now. And so much of those experiences, I've kind of kept, I'm always writing things down. So journaling or notes or songs or whatever. And I just really wanted to capture that feeling of standing up on the stage and walking out onto the stage for the first time, and kind of those emotions. So it definitely so much, the book parallels my life for sure.
Okay. So when you talk about writing, so writing songs, writing books, quite a different genre. How do you approach the two? Are there similarities and maybe some of the differences?
Yeah, that's a great question. I definitely find my brain is in a very different place when I'm writing a song versus when I'm writing a novel or even a piece for a magazine or something. Songwriting usually hits me, and it is one of those things where I find that if I don't sort of drop what I'm doing and get that idea down on paper, it vanishes. I don't know where it goes. It goes to some other songwriter somewhere. I find they just drift in really, really lightly unless I grab it.
When you say you grab it, does that mean you have to write it down? Or?
Yes,
okay.
I do. Or hum it incessantly until I get to paper, which my family loves. So yeah, I definitely have to capture that right away. But with writing, for me, specifically writing novels, I have a pretty, I'm very strict about what my schedule is for that. And unfortunately, I don't know how many novel writers do have the luxury of waiting to be very inspired. And you would know this very well, but yeah, I set my schedule to be down in my office at 5:30 or 6, and I usually, if I can make like a chunk of 3 hours work, that's my time, and that's when I write. So it's quite a different sensation and experience between the songs and writing novels for sure. Yeah.
So once you're committed to write a novel, give me some insight into your schedule. You mentioned it. Do you write every day? Do you go back and edit a lot? How does that process all work?
Okay, so I try to go one draft right through the story. I usually have a pretty good idea of where the story's going to go. With One Night Only, I really did. Not so much with Mountain Girl. I didn't know how that story was going to end. I was sort of waiting for the characters to sort of lead me. With One Night Only, I really found that I knew where it was going to go. I knew how I wanted it to end, and I knew the experience that I was hoping the reader would have. So I did one full draft, and I'm very careful not to go back. I don't know if you do this, but I find if I start going back and editing, I just get way too in my head and thinking, you know, this isn't very good, and it's hard to have the motivation. So I just let myself go for that first draft. And I do try and set either a word or a time. I try to do between 2,000 and 3,000 words a day, and I set those goals. And if I can, I like to do it every day, because I find specifically with One Night Only, it has a lot of dialogue, and I really find that if I give it too much of a break, then I kind of lose the momentum of that dialogue.
Almost lose the rhythm of
100%.
what you're
Yes, and then I can't remember how everyone's feeling.
Right.
Then I have to go back, and it gets into a big mess.
So in the new book, One Night Only, really unique. I enjoyed reading and the character development and so forth. But at the back of the book, it just sort of struck me like, oh, this is very musically oriented, because every chapter is a song.
Yes.
And so just tell me about that process.
Absolutely. So as I was writing the book, I always have music playing. It's definitely my whole life. I've always had music going in any room at any time. And there was lyrics that would sort of catch a lyric on a song that was playing and kind of write it in the margin or write it into the top of the page or something. And I thought, oh, that would be really neat if you could have lyrics throughout the book. But then I found out that you can't do that unless you call every artist and ask them. So that wasn't going to happen. So I decided on the idea of whatever the song was that really kind of felt most connected to that chapter, that I would use the song title and then make it into a playlist.
Right.
And it changed many, many times as I was writing the novel, and honestly I could change it today, because I fall in love with a new song every day. But
I have to say, not too many books come with their own playlist.
Yes, it was so fun, and I listen, like I've got it on my phone, and I send it to anybody who asks. And it really sort of, I think for me too, I don't know if you do this, but when I'm writing a story, I see the characters and I see what's happening in my head, almost like a movie. So this was sort of the soundtrack to the movie as well. And it definitely really inspired a lot of where the story took me.
I can see it really bringing the character alive, for sure.
Yes.
So let's talk about the character, the main character, Sky Black. Is that correct?
Yes.
Pretty dynamic individual. Let's just talk about her life a little bit and some of the things that she encountered without giving away the whole story.
Yes.
And how did you sort of develop that character?
Yeah. Well, I always like to start by saying that Sky is not me. My parents like that because she doesn't do all the best things in the book. This very interesting thing that happened with Sky is when I first wrote this book, that first draft that I talk about, I actually wrote her as a man. It was his name was Cole, and I wrote the entire story as a man. And then when I sent it to my agent, she said, some really nice things, but she said, I feel like it would be better and closer to you if it was a woman. And she said, why didn't you write it as a woman? And it was a really interesting couple weeks for me after she said that, because obviously the end of that conversation was, could you write it as a woman? And you know what it's like when you finish your novel. You don't feel like rewriting it the next week. So I struggled with that for a while.
Right.
And I realized that I think because of the very, tumultuous narrative of Sky's life in the book, I think I was sort of afraid to get that close to her. So I was kind of using Cole as maybe a bit of a distancing mechanism. So then I decided that actually, my agent was right, and I went back, rewrote the entire thing. And that was really interesting because even from the perspective of the audience and all the other characters that revolve around Sky now, I found that how people treat female musicians versus male musicians is very different. The comments that they say, the things that an agent would say when they come to you, the label, et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of had to really tear apart what the story was and redo it as if it were, a female in the music industry, which is a very different story. So I think my agent was right. I did curse her under my breath a lot during those 2 weeks. But
That's
yeah.
a pretty big change, but I think you pulled it off, and you have to be happy with the results.
Yes, I was. I was really happy with it. When it was done, it really felt she was right. It felt like it was closer to the story that I wanted to tell. And I felt even more that I really knew what she was going through. And yeah, you know, she's had a really hard life, which that part is definitely a departure from my life. But she grew up in Nelson, so she's got the BC roots like I do, and always loved music. Other things have happened to her, but she, in the end, you know, she was just so focused on her goal of making music and being successful. And
that's one thing I noticed in the book, is that there's a pretty strong sense of place. So you talk about Nelson, you talk about East Vancouver, you talk about Cranbrook. Why so specific, and do you think that adds to the story?
I love that question. So thank you for that. I really, because I've played on the stages, all the stages that are mentioned in the book, except for at the very end. Well, Key City, yes, but not the Grammys. I've never been to the Grammys. But I really wanted to have that first person perspective of what those rooms felt like. And my intention of connecting the performer with the audience, I felt like that specificity needed to be there. So it was a bit of a problem once my agent started to taking it out to some of the big publishers, because some of the requests I had were to change it to a US setting, or to not make it so specific so it could kind of be happening anywhere. And I was pretty adamant to stay the course that I did. I'm glad now that I did. I had moments of doubting myself through that process, but I also wanted people around here and people that support me and my band to feel like they were seen too. Right. So I hope that was accomplished.
Yeah, I think you did a good job on that side of it as well. So I want to just talk a little bit about the dynamics of a band. You said Wild Honey's been together for 11 years.
Yep.
How does that all play out? I know you're all performers, you're all musicians. You know, you obviously love to entertain. You know, what's the motivating? What drives you to do that?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's such a different part of my life, the band versus writing, because as you know, writing is such a solitary, you know, pursuit 90% of the time. Then you get to do stuff like this. But with the band, it's completely about the three of us. And we started the band because we wanted to spend more time together, and we kind of felt like we needed an excuse. We were always like, oh, we should go for coffee, we'll meet and do this, meet and do that, and it just kept not happening. We were very busy. We have 8 daughters between the three of us, so we needed something that was a little more like permanent, and that's why we started the band. And yeah, it's so fulfilling in such a different way artistically for me. And part of that is just the collaboration that happens every time we go on, we're preparing to go on stage. Songwriting, I do write the songs by myself, but I always send versions to the girls, Jess and Laura, and then they come back with ideas and suggestions and things that always make it better. I love that. And yeah, so it's definitely 2 different parts. One thing about being the musician and being on stage that's different is it's actually like a physical thing as well. You know, when you're playing your instrument, it's actually quite a physical thing, and singing.
So you're making an emotional and a physical connection, really.
Totally, yes. So it feels very like all body. I had to remind myself when I was launching one night only, you know, that like we had a big event, and I thought, okay, well, I've already written the book. I don't have to go on the stage and write the book. So that's good. But yeah, they're definitely quite distinctive.
Yeah, but there are similarities, and there are connections between the two. I can see where being a musician like yourself and being comfortable in front of a stage would be a great asset when it came to, you know, giving you insight into the character that you're developing.
Definitely.
So I also wanted to ask you about your writing style. I know that you work along with a writing group. based out of Fernie. Can you just give me a little bit of an idea what that experience is like?
Yes, yes. Fernie Mountain Writers Group is my group, and it was founded by Nick Milligan, who's now the mayor of Fernie. And we have a group of 6 of us, actually now 5, and we've been together for 4 years. And at first, the first I'd say 6 months to a year, COVID was happening, so it was all on Zoom, which is definitely a bit of a distance. It is a challenge for sure. Oh my goodness. So we're taking each other's pieces and, reading and trying to give feedback through Zoom, and everything feels awkward. But now, ever since we could get back together, then we get together once a month. Everyone submits pieces, and I was workshopping this novel the whole time. So sometimes I would just do scenes, and sometimes I would do up to chapters, and very honest. We were very honest with each other, obviously respect each other's writing, so never being mean, but just really about how everybody's writing, what emotions it evokes. I think that's the big thing. We all just want our readers to feel something, whatever that intended emotion is, and I can't say enough about how valuable that experience is for me as a writer.
Right. That immediate feedback has got to be pretty valuable for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, so when you sit down with a writing group, do you have any particular agenda or goals that you'd like to accomplish, or how does that all work?
Yes, so when you submit your piece, usually you have 2 or 3 intentions that you send with it, what you'd like the group to maybe look for, or specific feedback you're looking for. And then we kind of go around the table. It's usually about a 3-hour process, and everybody takes their turns. You have notes on everybody's piece, and our main rule, which we do break from time to time, is that when it's your piece is being discussed, you can't speak until the end. So there's no giving explanations or anything. Everyone takes their turn, and unless there's a direct question for you, then you just let everybody speak, and then in the end you can answer to the feedback. I found that helpful, because I feel like if it's really good writing, it shouldn't need any explanations, and sometimes I'm quick to jump and be like, well, that's because, but it should be, your readers are home alone in their chair reading, and they should absorb what you want to give them.
Maybe a bit of a cross-section or a reflection of maybe what your potential audience might be as well. So let's just talk about who is the intended audience of your book. Now, I know as writers, we think everyone wants to read our book.
That was my answer. Everyone.
But specifically, who would the ideal reader of your book be?
I love that question too, Keith. That's excellent, because you think about it a lot, don't you, when you're writing? You think about who's going to be reading it. I definitely, like I said, I wanted the local, people around here, people that go to live music and support live music. I was really hoping that if they read it, they would feel seen. I was really hoping that musicians would feel like I was maybe saying something that they haven't really said out loud. In one of the first scenes, the book opens with Sky playing what at that point she thinks is probably her last show. And there's a lot of emotions that can happen up there, and she decided to play a solo show, so she's got no band behind her. It's just her with her guitar. And I've played shows like that, and it's funny, the little voice in your head that's like, ooh, step closer to the edge of the building, is the voice that's sort of like, oh, what if your hand stopped? So there's these sort of little weird thoughts that go on, and I really wanted I put that in there, and I was hoping that it would sort of be a bit of a, other musicians would be like, oh, I felt like that too. And the musicians that have read it have all commented on those scenes, so and that means a lot to me. One of the first musicians that did read it was Barney Bentall. He's a close friend, and when I finished the manuscript, I sent it to him, and he had some great feedback, but specifically those scenes, which meant a lot.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So when we talk about audience and their reaction and so forth, what reaction would you like to see, or have you seen from the book?
Yeah, I would say the one thing I wanted to make sure I got right was the music. So I have had that feedback from some musicians. Some I know, and a couple that I don't know, which is always nice, you know, when someone doesn't have anything invested and feels the need to reach out.
Makes it real, right?
Oh, it does. Yeah, yeah. When I was launching the book, people that had read it prior to it coming out were making comments, because it was very important to me that at the launch of the book, music was involved. So through the book, there's a few songs that have their lyrics written in the book, and I sang one of those. And I had a good friend of mine, Rylan Morans, and Sierra Noble. They're both musicians. They came and really sang some beautiful songs from their hearts that kind of captured the spirit of the book. So it was a really special night, and they were speaking about the characters in the book and how they would react in this scene of this show, and that meant everything to me, because you know, when your characters become real people to your readers, yeah, there's no greater feeling than that.
It feels good for a writer, doesn't it?
Oh, it's the best.
So let's just talk about the publishing experience for a moment.
Yes.
How did it all physically go together? So you write a book, you have a manuscript, you submit it to your agent. How did the rest of it go?
Yes. So I did do the rewrite, as I mentioned before, and then sent the new manuscript to my agent. She's wonderful, Hilary McMahon, out of Westwood Creative Artists in Toronto. So she sent it to all the big houses, publishing houses, the big five, and we got some amazing feedback. A lot of things that people wanted tweaked, that at first I was sort of like, okay, we can do that. And then it kind of got to a point for me where I felt like I didn't want it. I was losing my grasp on the story. And I felt
After
like,
all, it is your story.
yeah. And it meant so much to me because it was so personal at that point. So I had to do another couple weeks of really self-checking of what my goal was in this whole journey. And I knew that it was really important for me that the story be the story that I wanted to tell. And I wanted to pay respect to all the artists that inspire me and not veer. There's some hard scenes in this book, and I needed them to be there. Also, a man that was a very close friend of mine, he was in another writing group that I was in, Mark Kussner, out of Vancouver. He did a lot of mentoring with me through the book, through some of the harder parts, and he passed away after the first manuscript was complete. And I really wanted to honor him. I dedicated the book to him, and so I was very adamant about sticking to the story. That's a very long-winded answer. But what happened then was, at the end of all these different feedbacks and things, maybe we could go this way or that way, I just decided to take it back. And my agent was so gracious about this. And I started my own publishing company called East Shore Books, and I published it myself and did the cover myself, because I had always seen the cover in my head. But as you know, when publishers take it, you lose the right to make those decisions, including even up to the title. And the ending that I wanted to have was in jeopardy. And so, yeah, it was really hard, to be honest.
You took control of it.
I took control of it after a year and a half of having no control of it. And I published the story I wanted to publish. So, yeah.
So just talk about the cover. The cover is very dramatic and very eye-catching. How did that all come together?
Thank you. Right from as soon as I started to write it as Sky instead of having the male character, I knew that the intensity of her, she's quite a intense character, and she, as much as the rest of her life is such chaos, when in the music world, she knows exactly who she is and what she wants to be. So I knew I just wanted it to have this strong female face on the cover. And as I was writing it, like I said, I sort of see it all in my head, and I hear all the music, and I kind of saw her. Then I had to go looking for this girl. It was on one of the Shutterstock pages, and it took me months. But when I saw that picture, I was like, there she is. That's her. And So then from there it was pretty, the rest of it, once I had her face on there, the rest of it kind of came together. I sort of wanted it to look like a cassette tape. That's sort of why the little Long Live Rock and Roll's on the side, and just sort of make sure that it was what Sky would, she just, music is everything for her.
Sure. So I have to ask you, Shelby, you're a musician, a mother, a writer. How do you balance it? How do you keep everything sort of going and giving priority to what needs to be done?
Oh, how much time do we have left? I love that. I kind of follow my heart for sure. I've stopped doing things that don't make me feel lit up inside. So I have cut other things out of my life to make time for the things that I'm really passionate about. My family and my close friends are absolutely number one. I actually took a full-time job this year as well at Yakinet Nucleate First Nation, which I've absolutely loved. It's an absolute privilege. So I do that from home too. So I kind of section my day into different sections of what I'm going to do. And when I've got an hour where I'm going to play my instrument, then I have to be disciplined about that. So there's definitely some discipline involved. But I try to, when my kids come home from school and on the weekends, I try as much as I can to give that time to my family.
Sure. So let's just talk about the future. What
Yes.
plans do you have for future? You did mention that you had a novel you sort of put on the back burner,
Yes.
and you're thinking of bringing that forward again.
I am. So it's kind of been like itching at the back of me. It was signed with an American publisher, and then when everything happened with COVID, they folded. So I had a contract with them. It's now dissolved, so the time's let up on that. And yeah, I definitely would like to put that one out there. It's a different story, also with a female protagonist, but takes place on the U.S. Mexican border, and then after that into New York. So it's an American story. I did a lot of research for that one, and definitely kind of stretched, like we were saying with the What You Know. I definitely learned a lot to write that one. It was really, it was very fun, but very challenging. So that will probably be next.
What's the timeline on that?
I'm hoping to have it out by July, but that would be if I can carry on with these short books and do it myself. If not, if I go through my agent, you know how that goes, could be years. So I'm deciding, but I really have found this process just really fulfilling. And when I pass someone on the street or I run into my neighbor and they just read the book and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe XYZ happens, no spoilers. That absolutely fills me up, and I don't know if I want much more than that. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on the new book. Give me
Thank
the
you.
30-second elevator pitch on why people should read your book.
Oh, wow. I think you should read my book because not everyone gets to sort of step behind the curtain of what it's like to step on stage. And I hope that I can make you feel what it feels like to be up there versus being in the audience, and sort of when I'm on the stage looking out to you, how I'm feeling. And I hope there's a new perspective on what artists are feeling up there, and that we're in the same kind of energy field that you are. Yeah, and then I hope that I've highlighted all the places that I've played, and it's definitely a celebration of music and how important music is in our lives. It definitely is for me.
Great. Well, thank you for being a guest. We really appreciate it.
Thank
Congratulations, as I mentioned, on the new book.
Thank
The
you.
book is One Night Only. Shelby Knudsen, based out of Fernie. Her new novel released just this year. So congratulations.
Thank you so much, Keith. It was it was a pleasure.
And my name is Keith Powell, and this has been Talking Kootenay Books.